In the twisted realm of Nurgle, where decay breeds eternal life, the story of the Plague Marines begins not with hatred, but with desperation. During the dark days of the Horus Heresy, the Death Guard Legion found themselves adrift in the warp, their ships crippled by a devastating plague. As their bodies rotted and organs liquefied, they faced a choice that would forever alter their destiny. Their Primarch, Mortarion, who had once fought against tyrants who ruled through chemical warfare, now watched helplessly as his son suffered agonies beyond comprehension. The pride of these once noble warriors crumbled in the face of endless torment, until finally, in their darkest hour, they embraced the very thing they had sworn to destroy. Nurgle, the chaos god of decay, offered them not just survival, but a twisted form of immortality. Their transformation was not just physical, it was a fundamental shift in how they perceived existence itself. The transformation from proud space marines to plague marines was an experience that redefined the very concept of pain. Their power armor, once gleaming with the honor of the Emperor's finest, became a sealed ecosystem of disease and decay. Every breath became a symphony of rattling lungs and gurgling fluids. Yet, where others would find horror, they discovered a perverse serenity. Their bodies, now hosts to thousands of plagues, became living laboratories of contagion. The very weapons they wielded evolved alongside them, their bolters weeping corrosive fluids, their blades dripping with virulent toxins. But perhaps the most profound change was in their minds, the acceptance of decay as a natural force, a twisted enlightenment that turned revulsion into reverence. They began to see beauty in the blooming of a new pox, wisdom in the cycle of rot and rebirth. On the battlefield, Plague Marines became living embodiments of inevitability. Their presence alone was enough to corrupt the very ground they walked upon, turning fertile earth into poisoned wasteland. Each step left pools of bubbling corruption. Each breath released clouds of devastating contagions. Their resilience became legendary. Bolter rounds would sink into bloated flesh without effect. Blades would shatter against pestilent armor. The diseases they carried were not mere biological weapons, but carefully crafted works of art, each plague bearing its own personality, its own purpose. They took pride in their creations, treating each new strain of virus as a painter would treat their masterpiece. The battlefield became their canvas, and suffering their medium of expression. Yet beneath their rotted exterior remained a dark brotherhood, bound by their shared transformation and their devotion to the cycle of decay. In their fortresses of rust and rot, the Plague Marines developed their own dark culture. They became philosophers of decay, scholars of pestilence. Their strongholds echoed with the sound of tolling bells and bubbling cauldrons, where new diseases were brewed with methodical care. They maintained intricate records of their plagues, documenting each symptom, each mutation with scientific precision. Their devotion to Nurgle manifested in grotesque rituals, where new plagues were celebrated with the same joy a father might show for a newborn. They saw themselves not as destroyers, but as gardeners of a new kind of life. In their eyes, they were spreading Nurgle's gifts across the galaxy, bringing enlightenment through suffering. Each plague was a step toward their god's ultimate vision, a universe where death and rebirth were one and the same. The knowledge accumulated by the Plague Marines over millennia defied conventional understanding. Their flesh became living grimoires, with diseases writing their formulas directly onto rotting skin. They developed a deep understanding of the metaphysical nature of contagion, seeing patterns in the spread of plagues that spoke to fundamental truths about existence itself. Their expertise encompassed not just biological warfare, but the very mathematics of decay. They could calculate the exact rate at which hope would rot in a besieged population, measure the precise moment when despair would bloom into acceptance. This forbidden knowledge was passed down through generations, each Plague Marine adding their own discoveries to their legion's growing compendium of corruption. Their expertise made them not just warriors, but artists of entropy. When Plague Marines laid siege to a world, it was unlike any conventional warfare. Their attacks began long before the first shot was fired, with invisible spores seeding the target with dormant diseases. They would watch with paternal pride as their plagues took root, as society began to unravel from within. The transformation of a world became a slow, inexorable process. Buildings would soften and flow like wax, streets would pulse with organic life, and the very air would become thick with spores that carried whispered promises of relief through submission. They saw beauty in this process, in the way ordered civilization would dissolve into organic chaos. Each conquered world became a new garden in Nurgle's domain, a testament to the patient, inevitable nature of decay. The vessels of the Plague Marines became legendary horrors in their own right. These ships, ancient leviathans of the void, were as much alive as their crew. The hull's breath leaked and festered with countless diseases. Within these floating plagued monasteries, the Plague Marines conducted their experiments and planned their campaigns. The ship's corridors were filled with the drone of flies and the gurgle of toxic fluids flowing through vein-like conduits. Even the machine spirits of these vessels had been corrupted, their logic engines infected with viral scrapgood that made them participants in Nurgle's great work. These ships carried not just warriors, but entire ecosystems of disease, ready to be unleashed upon the galaxy. In quiet moments, between campaigns of contagion, the Plague Marines would commune with the Garden of Nurgle in the warp. Here, in this impossible realm where reality festered and time flowed like pus, they found their true purpose. They witnessed the perfect cycle of death and rebirth, saw how destruction and creation were merely different aspects of the same process. In these moments of contemplation, they understood that their role in the universe was not merely to destroy, but to transform. Each plague they released was a key to unlock new forms of existence, each infection a step toward universal change. Their faith in Nurgle's vision became absolute, for they had seen the truth in his garden, that in decay lies the seed of renewal. The legacy of the Plague Marines extends far beyond the physical realm. They are the harbingers of a fundamental truth that the universe itself is in a state of constant decay and rebirth. Their existence serves as a dark mirror to the Imperium's rigid order, showing how even the most steadfast defenses must eventually crumble. Yet in their corruption lies a strange form of hope, the promise that death is not the end, but merely part of an eternal cycle. Their story is one of transformation, of finding purpose in what others would call damnation. In their unending march across the galaxy, they spread not just disease, but a terrible enlightenment, that in accepting decay, one might find a form of immortality that the Emperor himself could never offer.